October 12, 1983. The sun has not yet risen over McLean, Virginia. In the pre-dawn quiet, a soft yellow light spills from a kitchen window, painting a perfect tableau of American domesticity. Inside, a woman named Anna Harper moves with the practiced economy of a mother on a mission. The coffee is brewing, its aroma a comforting promise of the day to come. 2 lunchboxes sit on the counter, neatly packed. Emily, aged 6, and Michael, just 4, are being gently coaxed from their beds. Their small sleepy protests a familiar soundtrack to the morning ritual. Her husband David is knotting his tie, talking about a presentation he has later that day. It is a scene of such profound, almost cliché normality that it could have been lifted from a television commercial. It is a life built on routine, on shared histories, on the unspoken trust that binds a family together. At approximately 6:47 a.m., Anna Harper kneels down. She looks her children in the eyes, one after the other. She kisses their foreheads, a gesture of maternal love performed thousands of times before. She tells them to be good at school. She straightens her husband's collar and tells him she has an early meeting at her office, a technical analyst position at the defense contractor where they both work. It is a plausible, unremarkable reason to leave a few minutes early. He nods, distracted, already thinking about his day. She picks up her purse and a single, slim briefcase. She walks out the front door of their suburban home, the click of the lock echoing softly in the hallway. And then, she vanishes. She vanishes not just from the street or from the town, but from the very fabric of the life she had so meticulously woven around herself for nearly a decade. She never came back. For the first 12 hours, there was no alarm. A missed phone call. A meeting that ran late. David Harper returned home that evening to an empty house. He assumed she had gone out with friends, perhaps running errands after her meeting. Annoyance slowly curdled into unease, and then, as the hours ticked by into the late evening, unease blossomed into a cold, creeping dread. The next morning, he reported his wife missing. The local police treated it as a standard case, another person overwhelmed by the pressures of life. They asked the usual questions. Was she unhappy? Were there financial problems? Was there another man? David, confused and terrified, had no answers. His wife was a devoted mother, a reliable employee, a PTA volunteer. She baked cookies for school fundraisers. She attended Little League games. She was the stable center of their universe. This made no sense. 3 days later, her car was found. It sat in a long-term parking lot at Dulles International Airport, a silent, abandoned vessel. The keys were still in the ignition, an invitation to anyone who might pass by. It was a detail so strange, so out of place, that it elevated the case beyond a simple disappearance. And it was at this point that the local police received a visit from men who did not flash local badges. They were from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They quietly took over the case, and they informed David Harper that he needed to sit down. They told him that the woman he had loved, the woman who had borne his children, the woman who had shared his bed for 7 years, was not named Anna Harper. They told him that she was not a Polish immigrant who had fled communism for a better life in the West. They told him she was, in all probability, a highly trained officer of the Soviet Union's Committee for State Security, the KGB. By the time federal investigators could piece together the ghost-like trail she had left behind, the woman they knew as Anna Harper was thousands of miles away. She was sitting in a sterile debriefing room somewhere in Moscow, sipping hot tea, the chill of a Virginia autumn replaced by the biting cold of a Russian one. She was answering questions in flawless, unaccented Russian, methodically recounting the details of a life lived as a lie. This story is not merely about espionage. It is not about microfilm, dead drops, or the transfer of classified secrets, though it contains all of those things. This is a story about the weaponization of the American dream itself. It is about how the grand, ideological conflict of the Cold War was waged not only in the halls of power or on distant battlefields, but in the quiet, tree-lined streets of American suburbia. Our thesis is this: the case of Yelena Sukalova, the woman who became Anna Harper, demonstrates that the Cold War's most insidious battleground was the human heart. It proves that the greatest acts of betrayal are not those committed against a nation, but against the people who love and trust you unconditionally. This is a forensic examination of a life constructed as an illusion, a deep dive into the psychology of a woman who chose ideology over her own children, and a haunting exploration of the collateral damage left behind when that illusion was finally, brutally shattered. We will journey back in time, not just to the tense political climate of the 1970s and 80s, but into the very mind of an operative trained to see love, marriage, and motherhood as nothing more than tools of the trade. This is the story of how an enemy state didn't just steal secrets, it stole a life, it stole a family, and in doing so, it revealed the terrifying fragility of the reality we build for ourselves. The first domino had fallen the moment she walked out that door, but the chain reaction had begun years earlier, in a place in a system that was the complete antithesis of that peaceful Virginia morning. A system designed to create ghosts. This investigation will uncover the intricate machinery behind the KGB's illegals program, a strategy of such audacious, long-term thinking that it almost defies belief. It wasn't about quick victories. It was about planting human seeds in enemy soil and waiting, sometimes for decades, for them to bear fruit. Yelena was one such seed. We will dissect the meticulous process of her transformation, from a promising student in Minsk to a blank slate, an unremarkable face in the crowd, a woman whose greatest weapon was her own perceived normality. Her marriage to David Harper was not a matter of chance or romance. It was a strategic merger, an operational masterstroke that gave her the one thing a spy craves above all else: perfect camouflage. She became invisible, hidden in plain sight within the very culture she was tasked to undermine. Furthermore, we will analyze the slow, methodical work of the FBI counterintelligence agents who eventually unraveled her cover. Her downfall was not cinematic. There was no high-speed chase, no dramatic confrontation. It was a story of bureaucracy and diligence, of a single, small mistake, a misplaced document, that pulled on a thread and kept pulling until the entire tapestry of her life came undone. We will explore the mindset of Agent Richard Callahan, a man who hunted Soviet spies not with gadgets, but with an encyclopedic knowledge of forged documents and a profound understanding of human inconsistency. His investigation was a race against time, a silent chess match played across continents, where the pieces were people's lives. And finally, we will confront the devastating human cost. For David Harper, the discovery was a psychological cataclysm. It forced him to reevaluate every shared memory, every whispered confidence, every moment of intimacy. Was any of it real? Or was he simply a pawn, a stepping stone in a game he never even knew he was playing? For their children, Emily and Michael, their mother's disappearance left a wound that could never truly heal, a void filled with unanswerable questions. They were the ultimate casualties of the Cold War, abandoned not by an enemy army, but by their own mother, a woman who looked at them and saw not her children, but a threat to her mission. Her choice on that October morning was the culmination of a decade of deception, a final, chilling act that cemented her legacy not as a master spy, but as a mother who committed the ultimate act of betrayal. This is the autopsy of that betrayal, a story that forces us to ask what we truly know about the people closest to us, and what secrets might lie dormant, just beneath the surface of an ordinary life. The popular image of Cold War espionage is a caricature, a fiction crafted in Hollywood and sensationalized in paperback novels. It is a world of suave, tuxedo-clad agents, of ingenious gadgets disguised as everyday objects, of high-stakes poker games in Monte Carlo and frantic car chases through the narrow streets of European capitals. The spy, in this mythology, is an extraordinary figure, dashing, brilliant, and always operating on the glamorous fringes of society. He is James Bond. He is the man from UN SEAL. He is an outsider, marked by his exceptionalism, easily identifiable once you know what to look for. This myth, comforting in its simplicity, serves a crucial purpose. It cordons off the world of espionage, making it seem like a separate, almost fantastical reality, far removed from the mundane rhythm of our own lives. Spies, we are led to believe, do not live next door. They do not coach soccer teams or volunteer at the school library. They do not wrestle with mortgages and car payments. That is our world, the safe world. Theirs is the world of shadows. The story of Yelena Mikhailovna Sukalova shatters this myth with brutal efficiency. Her story reveals a far more patient, more insidious, and ultimately more terrifying form of intelligence work. To understand how the unassuming Anna Harper came to exist, we must travel back to the source, to the heart of the Soviet system in the early 1970s. We must go to a place that existed in stark opposition to the open, chaotic society she would one day infiltrate. This is the world of the KGB's first chief directorate, and specifically its most secret and elite branch, Directorate S. This was the department responsible for the illegals, the deep-cover agents. Unlike traditional spies who operated under the protection of diplomatic immunity at embassies, the illegals were ghosts. They were given entirely new identities, painstakingly fabricated life stories known as legends, and inserted into foreign countries to live as ordinary citizens. They were a long-term investment, a human time bomb set to detonate years, or even decades, in the future. Their mission was not to steal a single, vital blueprint. Their mission was to become the blueprint, to embed themselves so deeply into the fabric of enemy society that they could access its secrets from the inside out. Yelena Sukalova was born in Minsk in 1947, a child of the post-war Soviet generation. She was raised in a world of ideological certainty, where the Communist Party was not just a political entity, but a quasi-religious faith. Her family background was impeccable. Her father was a mid-level bureaucrat in the Ministry of Agriculture, her mother a dedicated school teacher. They were true believers, cogs in the great machine of the Soviet state. From a young age, Yelena exhibited the precise qualities Directorate S looked for in its candidates. She was highly intelligent, but not in a way that drew attention to herself. She was linguistically gifted, particularly with English. She was disciplined, patient, and ideologically committed. But her most valuable trait, the one that made her a perfect candidate, was her profound unremarkability. Former instructors at the KGB's training facility outside Leningrad would later describe her as a gray mouse, the kind of person who could blend into any background, whose face you would struggle to recall just moments after meeting her. She possessed an almost preternatural ability for social camouflage, a chameleon-like quality that allowed her to absorb and reflect the characteristics of any group she was placed in. She was not born to stand out, she was born to disappear. Her training was a systematic process of erasure and reconstruction. It was a psychological crucible designed to burn away every trace of Yelena Sukalova. She spent years in isolation, studying not just the English language but its myriad dialects, its slang, its cultural nuances. She consumed American culture, movies, music, literature, magazines, not for entertainment but as operational texts. She learned to think, to dream, to react like an American. She was trained in the subtle arts of tradecraft, cryptography, surveillance, and counter-surveillance, the use of dead drops and brush passes. But the most important part of her education was the construction of her new identity. She was no longer Yelena from Minsk. She was becoming Anna Kowalik, a graduate student from Warsaw, Poland. The choice of a Polish legend was a stroke of genius. In the 1970s, during the era of détente, relations between the Eastern Bloc and the West were thawing slightly. It was plausible that a bright young academic from Poland might seek opportunities in America, ostensibly fleeing the mild oppression of the Polish communist regime for the freedoms of the West. This narrative would not only seem credible to U.S. immigration officials, it would engender sympathy. She wasn't just an immigrant, she was a refugee from the very system she secretly served. The KGB's forgers, the best in the world, created a flawless set of documents: a Polish passport, university transcripts, letters of recommendation, even a worn photograph of a family she never had. Every detail was designed to withstand scrutiny. Her mission, in its initial phase, was simple: to exist, to enroll in a university, to get a degree, to make friends, to build a life. She was not to seek out classified information. She was to become a person of no interest to anyone, patiently waiting for the moment when her true purpose would be activated. In 1974, with a suitcase full of carefully curated American-style clothes and a mind filled with a lifetime of lies, Anna Kowalik stepped off a plane in New York City. The seed had been planted. The America she entered was a nation in flux. It was a country grappling with the fallout of the Vietnam War, the Watergate scandal, and a deep-seated crisis of confidence. The post-war optimism of the 1950s had given way to the cynicism and uncertainty of the 1970s. Yet, it was also a society of immense opportunity and openness, a place where a person could reinvent themselves, where a stranger with a plausible story would be taken at face value. This cultural environment was the perfect incubator for an operative like Anna. For her first year, she followed her operational script to the letter. She enrolled in graduate classes in electrical engineering at a mid-tier university in New Jersey. She lived in a modest apartment, worked part-time in the campus library, and cultivated a small circle of friends. She was seen as polite but reserved, diligent in her studies but not exceptionally brilliant. She was just another foreign student, navigating the complexities of a new country. She was hiding in plain sight, her unremarkable nature her greatest shield. Her handlers in Moscow were content. The first phase of the operation was a success. She had taken root in enemy soil, unnoticed and unremarked upon. The next phase, however, would require her to do more than just exist. It would require her to infiltrate the most sacred of American institutions: the family. In the vast, impersonal calculus of espionage, human beings are often reduced to assets, targets, or collateral damage. Relationships are not forged through affection, but engineered for access. For Yelena Sukalova, living as Anna Kowalik, the next directive from Moscow was clear. She needed to deepen her cover, to anchor her identity so firmly in American soil that it would be immovable, unshakable. A single woman, a foreign national, would always be an outlier, a loose thread that could potentially be pulled. A married woman, an American wife and mother, would be something else entirely. She would be part of the fabric of society itself, her identity reinforced by the legal and social structures of her adopted homeland. The turning point in her mission, the event that would transform her from a passive sleeper agent into an active, embedded operative, came in 1975 at a community event in Princeton, New Jersey. It was there she met a man named David Harper. David Harper was, in many ways, the perfect target. At 32, he was an engineer, recently divorced, and by all accounts, a man of quiety, unassuming character. He was intelligent, but not cynical, kind-hearted, but perhaps a little lonely. Crucially, he worked for a mid-sized defense contractor, a company that designed and manufactured communication systems for the United States military. His work wasn't top secret, but it was sensitive. He was a man with access, however limited, to the world of classified information. To Yelena's handlers, he was not a person, he was a key, a potential gateway into the American defense industry. To Yelena, he was her next assignment. She approached the task with the same methodical discipline she applied to her studies. She presented herself as intelligent, kind, and refreshingly down-to-earth. She was everything David thought he was looking for. On David's side, the relationship was entirely genuine. He fell in love. His friends would later recall how smitten he was with this brilliant, slightly mysterious woman from Poland. He saw her as a kindred spirit, another quiet soul navigating the complexities of life. Whether Yelena felt anything real for him is a question that will forever remain locked within her. Was it possible to maintain a perfect emotional firewall, to simulate love and affection for years on end without some part of it becoming real? Or was she merely a consummate actress, playing the greatest role of her life? The psychological literature on deep-cover operatives suggests a complex process of compartmentalization, a mental splitting where the cover identity can sometimes feel more real than the original. She may have felt a genuine fondness for David, but it would have always been secondary to the mission. Her duty was to her country, to her ideology, to the KGB. David was a means to an end. They were married in a small, simple ceremony in April of 1976. There were no guests from Anna's side. She explained, with practiced regret, that her family back in Poland faced complications with travel visas, a story David accepted without question. Why wouldn't he? He was in love. With that ceremony, Anna Kowalik ceased to exist. She became Anna Harper, an American citizen, a wife. The transformation was legally, socially, and operationally complete. The marriage provided layers of legitimacy that made her virtually invisible to counterintelligence scrutiny. In the social landscape of 1970s America, a married woman with a family was simply not a suspect. She had weaponized societal expectations, turning the very image of domesticity into her most effective camouflage. The operation then accelerated. By 1977, the couple had moved to McLean, Virginia, a suburb teeming with government employees, military personnel, and defense contractors. It was the nerve center of the American security state, and Anna Harper was now living in its backyard. That same year, she gave birth to their first child, a daughter named Emily. A son, Michael, followed in 1979. The psychological implications of this development are staggering. A marriage can be feigned. But what of motherhood? Can a woman hold her own child in her arms, a child who is half hers, and see them only as an extension of her cover? Did she feel the profound biological bond of a mother, only to suppress it in the name of duty? Or was she so thoroughly conditioned that she could simulate even this most fundamental of human connections? This is the darkest, most impenetrable corner of her story. She was now not just a spy, but a mother, using her own children as human shields to protect her secret identity. While building her family, Anna was also building her career. Leveraging her degree in electrical engineering and her husband's connections, she secured a position as a technical analyst at the very same defense contractor that employed David, a company called Advanced Systems Technologies. The background check for her security clearance reviewed her fabricated Polish immigration records and academic credentials. The KGB's handiwork held up. The identity they had constructed nearly a decade earlier was robust enough to withstand the scrutiny of the time. By mid-1977, Anna Harper, an officer of the KGB, had a U.S. government security clearance. She had access. The seed that had been planted years ago was now ready to bear its poisonous fruit. This marked the shift from long-term positioning to active intelligence gathering. Her role at the company was seemingly mundane. She reviewed technical specifications, coordinated project timelines, and acted as a liaison between engineering teams and government clients. This placed her at the crossroads of information flow. She saw a steady stream of documents related to military contracts, equipment capabilities, and budget allocations. Individually, these pieces of information were often of low value. But for an intelligence analyst in Moscow, these mundane details, when aggregated, could paint a detailed picture of American military priorities, technological progress, and potential vulnerabilities. She was a human vacuum cleaner, quietly absorbing the ambient data of the American defense industry. Her method of transmission was deliberately low-tech and cautious, a reflection of her patient training. She avoided the risky cinematic tropes of espionage. There was no clandestine photography in locked offices, no copying of files onto microfilm. The risk of being caught was far too high. Instead, she relied on her most formidable weapon, her memory. She would memorize key details, component numbers, performance metrics, project deadlines, and later transcribe them into coded summaries. She passed this information to her KGB handler, a man operating under diplomatic cover at the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C., through a series of carefully orchestrated, fleeting encounters. These were brush passes in crowded public spaces, a museum lobby, a busy shopping center, a public park. And two people would walk past each other, their paths intersecting for no more than a few seconds, just long enough for a small object, like a hollowed-out coin or a folded newspaper, to be exchanged. Other times she would use a dead drop, a prearranged hiding spot, a loose brick in a garden wall, a hollowed-out book in a public library, where she could leave a package for her contact to retrieve later. For years, this clandestine rhythm continued, a secret pulse beating beneath the tranquil surface of her suburban life. She passed a steady trickle of intelligence to Moscow, solid, reliable information from a source who had proven herself to be disciplined, cautious, and perfectly, terrifyingly embedded. For nearly a decade, the elaborate fiction of Anna Harper's life held together, a masterpiece of tradecraft and psychological endurance. But the world outside her quiet Virginia suburb was changing. The relative calm of 1970s detente was shattered by the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. The election of Ronald Reagan in 1980 heralded a new, more aggressive phase of the Cold War. Reagan's rhetoric was confrontational. He labeled the Soviet Union an evil empire, and his administration poured billions into a military buildup designed to challenge Soviet power across the globe. This escalation in geopolitical tension had a direct impact on the shadow war being fought by intelligence agencies. The game became more dangerous, the stakes higher. American counterintelligence, particularly the FBI, was galvanized. They became more sophisticated, more paranoid, and more determined than ever to root out the deep-cover Soviet operatives they knew were hiding within American society. For the KGB, the shifting landscape meant they needed more from their assets. The steady trickle of mundane intelligence from Anna Harper was no longer enough. Moscow wanted more. In 1982, her handlers gave her a new, high-priority assignment. She was to obtain detailed technical information about a specific project her company was working on, a next-generation communications encryption system being developed for NATO forces in Europe. This was a significant escalation. It was no longer about collecting ambient data. This was targeted espionage against a top-tier military technology. It was the kind of intelligence that could give the Soviet Union a decisive battlefield advantage. And it required Anna to take risks she had never taken before. The pressure was immense. She began volunteering for extra assignments that would grant her access to the project's files. She stayed late at the office, poring over schematics and performance reports, committing them to memory. On a few rare occasions, when she was certain she was unobserved, she used a miniature camera, a marvel of Soviet technology disguised as a lipstick case, to photograph key documents. She was moving from the passive role of an observer to the active role of a thief. The quiet, disciplined operative was being forced to become a more reckless one. And in the high-stakes world of counterintelligence, recklessness is a fatal flaw. In the spring of 1983, she made a mistake. It was a small, almost insignificant error, the kind of slip-up that can happen to anyone working under immense pressure. After photographing a classified document, she failed to return it to its precise location within a secure file. It was a detail so minor it might have gone unnoticed. But it didn't. A meticulous security officer conducting a routine audit of classified materials flagged the discrepancy. This was the first domino. The document's misplacement triggered a standard internal security review. The review led to questions about who had accessed the file. Anna's name appeared on the access logs, not as a primary suspect, but simply as one of several people who had been in the secure area during the relevant time frame. The company reported the potential security breach to the FBI, as was protocol. The case landed on the desk of Richard Callahan, a veteran counterintelligence agent who had dedicated his career to hunting Soviet spies. Callahan was not a man who believed in coincidence. He began a quiet, methodical investigation, reviewing personnel files, cross-referencing access logs, and building a timeline. Anna Harper's name kept appearing, always on the periphery, never at the center. There was nothing concrete, just a series of small, nagging inconsistencies that pricked at Callahan's professional intuition. He decided to pull her file for a deeper look. This is where the twist in this story lies. Anna Harper was not brought down by a daring counter-spy or a high-tech surveillance operation. She was unraveled by a patient bureaucrat with an eye for detail. Callahan began to dig into the very foundation of her identity, her legend as Anna Kowalik. He found a gap of a few months in her employment history from 1974 that didn't quite align with what she had declared on her security clearance forms. It was a tiny crack in the facade. Callahan pressed on it. He sent inquiries to the State Department and the CIA requesting a closer examination of her Polish passport and immigration records. Under the microscope of expert forensic analysis, the flawless forgeries began to reveal their secrets. Subtle irregularities in the paper stock, inconsistencies in the watermarks. He requested verification of her academic records from the University of Warsaw through intelligence channels. The response that came back was chilling. The university had no record of a student named Anna Kowalik graduating with her credentials at that time. Callahan tried to track down people who might have known her in Poland before she emigrated. He found no one. It was as if Anna Kowalik had simply materialized out of thin air in 1974. By the summer of 1983, the FBI had enough circumstantial evidence to open a full-scale counterintelligence investigation. Anna Harper was now the primary target. The dominoes began to fall faster. A secret warrant was obtained. Her phone was tapped. A surveillance team was assigned to monitor her every move. Agents began conducting discreet interviews with her neighbors, friends, and colleagues, asking vague questions, fishing for any detail that seemed out of place. Her husband, David, was kept in the dark. The FBI couldn't be sure he wasn't complicit, and they couldn't risk him tipping her off. The suburban home that had been her fortress was now a fishbowl. For months, the surveillance yielded nothing. Anna was disciplined. If she sensed she was being watched, she gave no indication. Her routine remained unchanged. Work, home, children, school functions. She was a ghost, leaving no trail. But in September 1983, she made her second mistake. On a Saturday afternoon, she told David she was running errands. The FBI surveillance team followed. She drove to a busy shopping center in Georgetown, a historic neighborhood in Washington, D.C. For 40 minutes, she wandered through various stores seemingly at random, but the agents watching her knew this was not aimless shopping. They saw her path briefly intersect with that of another man. The interaction was fleeting, less than 10 seconds. No words were exchanged, but the man was instantly identified by the surveillance team. He was a known KGB officer operating under diplomatic cover at the Soviet embassy. It was a classic brush pass. This was the proof Callahan had been waiting for. It was the smoking gun that connected the suburban mother to the Kremlin. The investigation intensified overnight. The FBI now planned to watch her, waiting for her next contact, hoping to catch her in the act of passing classified material. They wanted to build an airtight case, not just against her, but against her entire network. But they made a critical error. They underestimated the paranoia and efficiency of the KGB. Anna's handlers, through their own counter-surveillance, likely detected the increased FBI scrutiny. They knew the net was closing. In early October, Anna received an emergency signal. The exact method remains classified, but it was likely a prearranged, innocuous-seeming message, a coded phrase in a classified newspaper ad, a short, cryptic phone call. The message was unequivocal. Your cover is blown. Evacuate immediately. This was the final domino. It triggered the choice she had been trained for, the one she must have dreaded for 9 years. She had to choose between her mission and her family. On the morning of October 12th, she made that choice. The morning routine we witnessed in Act 1 was not the act of a loving mother. It was the final performance of a compromised agent. Every gesture, the breakfast she made, the lunchboxes she packed, the kisses she gave her children, was a lie, a final piece of camouflage to ensure her escape. Inside the briefcase she carried was not work from the office, but an emergency escape kit. $15,000 in cash, a new set of false identity documents, and a one-way ticket to oblivion. She drove to the airport, abandoned the car, and, using her new identity, boarded a flight to Mexico City. From there, she would fly to Havana, and then onward to the safety of Moscow. She was a ghost, and she simply disappeared back into the shadows from which she came, leaving behind the shattered remnants of a life that was never really hers. When an earthquake strikes, the most violent shaking lasts only for a few moments, but the aftershocks can continue for years, and the landscape is forever changed. The departure of Yelena Sukalova on that October morning was an earthquake in the lives of the Harper family, and its tremors would reverberate for decades. The immediate aftermath for David Harper was a waking nightmare. One moment, he was a concerned husband searching for his missing wife. The next, he was sitting in a windowless room, facing 2 grim-faced FBI agents who were systematically dismantling his entire reality. They presented him with the evidence, the forged documents, the surveillance photos of the brush pass, the verified fact that the woman he knew as Anna Kowalik had never existed. Every memory he cherished was now tainted, every moment of shared intimacy cast in the sinister light of deception. The woman he loved had not just left him. She had never been real in the first place. David cooperated fully with the investigation, his grief mixed with a profound sense of humiliation and betrayal. He allowed the FBI to turn his home inside out, searching for any trace of her espionage activities. They found very little. She had been a professional, a ghost who left no tracks. The FBI eventually, and officially, cleared David of any complicity. He was what the intelligence community chillingly refers to as an unwitting asset, a man whose life and love had been hijacked for an operational purpose. But this official exoneration provided little comfort. He was left to raise 2 small children to somehow explain to them why their mother had vanished. How do you tell a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old that their mother was a foreign spy who chose her mission over them? How do you mend a wound that deep? David Harper largely withdrew from the world. He moved his family to another state, changed their names, and attempted to build a new life out of the wreckage. He never remarried. He became a man haunted by a phantom, forever defined by the greatest lie ever told to him. For the children, Emily and Michael, the legacy was one of perpetual absence and unanswered questions. Emily, old enough to have clear memories of her mother, was left with a confusing and painful dichotomy: the warm, loving woman who read her bedtime stories, and the cold, calculating stranger who abandoned her without a word. Michael, too young to remember her clearly, grew up with a void, a mother-shaped hole in his life, and the devastating knowledge that he was not reason enough for her to stay. They became the living, breathing collateral damage of the Cold War, their childhood's casualties of an ideological conflict fought by their own mother. Professionally, the Anna Harper case sent shockwaves through the American intelligence community. It exposed glaring vulnerabilities in the security clearance and background check processes of the 1970s. It served as a brutal wake-up call, proving that the Soviet Union's deep cover illegals program was not a theoretical threat, but a successful, ongoing operation. In the aftermath, security protocols for defense contractors were massively overhauled. The investigation into Anna Harper, or Yelena Sukalova, continued for years, but the trail went cold the moment she stepped onto Soviet soil. The KGB contact she met in Georgetown was quietly expelled from the United States, a diplomatic slap on the wrist. The intelligence she had passed was meticulously assessed. The conclusion was that while she had been a competent and productive spy, she had not stolen any crown jewels. The information was valuable, but not catastrophic. It had not fundamentally altered the strategic balance of the Cold War. In the grand scheme of things, her operational impact was marginal, but her human impact was absolute. This brings us to the universal lesson of her story. The tale of Yelena Sukalova is a chilling parable about the nature of truth, identity, and betrayal. It demonstrates that the most potent form of warfare is not fought with missiles and tanks, but with the weaponization of human intimacy. She did not breach a fortress with explosives. She breached a family with a wedding vow. Her story forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that the lives we build, the trust we place in others, are predicated on a shared understanding of reality, and what happens when that reality is revealed to be a meticulously crafted lie. The conflict between East and West was not just an abstract struggle between political systems. It was a battle fought in the kitchens, living rooms, and bedrooms of ordinary people. It was a war that could turn a loving wife into an enemy combatant and a family home into a battlefield. This form of espionage did not die with the Cold War. In 2010, the FBI arrested a ring of 10 Russian deep-cover agents, many of whom had spent years living seemingly ordinary lives in American suburbs. The most famous of them, Anna Chapman, became a media sensation, but others in her ring had families, homes, and jobs, perfectly mimicking the template established by operatives like Yelena Sukalova decades earlier. The methods have evolved. The modern spy must contend with biometrics, social media, and a vast digital footprint. But the core strategy remains the same. The exploitation of human trust is a timeless tool of statecraft. Today, the battle for influence is waged online, through disinformation campaigns and cyber warfare, but the goal is unchanged: to infiltrate, to deceive, and to undermine a society from within, turning its own openness and trust into a vulnerability. What, then, became of Yelena Sukalova? She disappeared into the closed system she had served her entire life. Unconfirmed reports from later defectors suggest she was given a medal, a new identity, and perhaps a new, less strenuous assignment within the KGB. She became a legend within the agency, a cautionary tale taught to new recruits, an example of both a successful long-term infiltration and the single mistake that can unravel it all. But did she ever think of the children she left behind? Did she lie awake at night, tormented by the image of their faces? Or was her ideological conviction so absolute, her psychological conditioning so complete, that she was able to compartmentalize that part of her life, to file it away as a necessary sacrifice for a cause she believed was greater than herself? This we will never know. It is the final, unanswerable question at the heart of her story. The story of Anna Harper ends where it began, with an absence. It is the story of a wedding ring left on a dresser, of family photo albums filled with a smiling liar, of 2 children who grew up looking at their own faces in the mirror, searching for a trace of a woman they could never truly know. She was a ghost who walked among us, a testament to the fact that the greatest threats are often not the ones we can see, but the ones we invite into our homes and into our hearts. The Cold War is over, the Soviet Union is gone. But the echoes of that conflict still reverberate, not in the history books or political archives, but in the quiet, shattered lives of the people who were caught in its crossfire. Yelena Sukalova won her battle. She escaped and served her country. But in the process, she lost something infinitely more valuable, her own humanity, and that is a price no ideology can ever justify.